The other day, I was frustrated to see in the LA Times that the California University Board of Trustees has approved a 15% tax increase in undergraduate tuition on top of the increases from last year. This is because right now, California has a state budget deficit of $20 billion and cannot divert enough funding to fund our Cal State system. The slowed economy is simply not generating enough revenue for our state to function properly. Unemployment is at 12.4% according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics. Even though the economy is doing so badly right now, we still have the highest tax rate in the nation at 8.25%. To help solve the Cal State funding issue, I propose we significantly reduce this tax. Now you're probably thinking to yourself, but Josh, we need the high rate in order to close the state deficit and fund our schools and other programs. Contrary to this belief, higher tax rate does not equal higher tax revenue. This is why right now, even with the high tax rate, our schools are still underfunded. A stronger economy is what causes higher tax revenue. Let's look at some historical evidence that backs up this theory. Daniel Mitchell, who holds a PhD in economics from the George Mason University, writes for the Heritage Foundation, thanks to bracket creep, the inflation of the 1970s pushed millions of taxpayers into a higher tax bracket, even though their inflation-adjusted incomes were not rising. To help offset this tax increase and also to improve incentives to work, save, and invest, President Reagan proposed sweeping tax rate reductions during the 1980s. One unambiguous tax rate during 1983 caused the income tax rate to increase, revenue to increase by 54% by 1989, 28% when you adjust for inflation. Former Representative Jack Kemp, who was a chief architect of the Reagan tax cut, said, at some point, additional taxes so discourage the activity being taxed, such as working and investing, that they collect less revenue rather than more. There are, after all, two rates that yield the same amount of revenue: high tax rates on low production or low tax rates on high production. Now we know that the economy is what drives tax rates, but what drives the economy? Well, the U.S. Small Business Administration says that states pay 44% of total U.S. private payroll and create over half of the non-private, of the private GDP. They're the ones that drive the economy and pay taxes by providing jobs which produce taxes, paying corporate taxes, and having transactions which are taxed through the sales tax. Unfortunately, there is a predominant issue which many businesses are struggling with right now. According to the Union Bank's 10th Annual Small Business Survey, which was taken in January of 2010, state and local business taxes emerged as the second biggest challenge to doing business in California. This is the top challenge for 38% of small businesses, up from 30% last year. In the survey, A.D. Alvarez, the former head of Small Business Administration for the Clinton administration, said, small business owners are still hoping for relief from both the state and federal government to reduce costs that are outside their control. Those who have survived the recession remain cautious as they wait to see what happens in Sacramento and Washington. As you can see, tax rates and small business growth are closely linked. Businesses are going to continue to reduce their taxable financial transactions and only carefully grow, causing our economy to remain in its current climate, a climate that does not provide enough revenue for our colleges. In conclusion, reducing taxes across the board will create a more favorable environment for our small businesses. This will give them the incentive to expand more and spend more money, and this economic growth will give us the tax revenue we really need. I'll leave you with this quote from former President John F. Kennedy, who said, "It is a paradoxical truth that if you increase the tax revenue, if you lower the tax rate and increase the tax revenue, it is not to it is not to create a budget deficit, but it is to actually create a budget surplus. Thank you.
Mark, some comments?
That was a great speech. You had a lot of enthusiasm in your speech, especially a lot of the quotes. Like I noticed that you weren't like, yeah, you did look down at your notes, but most of them looked like you had them memorized, so that was really good, and looked like you were really informed about the topic of high tech. Yeah.
All right, Joshua, I like the opening. You've got a clear statement of your personal belief on this. You've got some factual data that you're introducing, and then you've got a very clear statement of what your goal is for the presentation. There isn't really much of a preview, though, and although I think you did a pretty good job signposting the structure in the speech, you do want to lead us a little bit more directly into what the content is going to be in that opening section. On the content issues, I thought that you started off pretty well with some good historical context on the issue. I do think that you are relying on some data that is probably going to seem old by most people's comparisons. I can remember stuff like that, but some of your classmates are going to be looking at, well, that happened before I was born. Well, a lot of things happen before people were born. Unfortunately, the audience sometimes needs to have it happen in their lifetime for it actually to really exist in their mind. So if you had some more recent stuff, I think that would be helpful. Either maybe information about tax cuts producing increased revenues at the federal level, or states that had probably tried the same kinds of things and saw enhanced revenues as a consequence. I don't think that it would be hard to find some illustrations of that. I'm not saying don't use the historical context, but when that's all you've got in this argument, I think it's a little bit less effective than it could be. I did think that when you talked about California's problems in particular, you did a nice job trying to show how taxes were connected to the difficulty that small businesses faced, and the small businesses are the primary source of both tax revenues and jobs, and so the link between those two is explored pretty well. Here's where you could get in some emotional involvement. If you had the story about some business owner who is stretched and stuck in the middle, unable to hire people, unable to expand their business, and struggling to pay the tax rate, if you've got their personal story, I think then you're going to get a little bit more emotional involvement in it. On delivery issues, you've got pretty good energy. Sometimes I think you need a little bit more variety in the energy level. It seems very consistent. Your eye contact, your audience contact was very solid. You look a little stiff when you're standing there. You do take on a good, confident posture, but it seems like you stand in the one place the whole time and your gestures are a little repetitive. Nothing distracting, nothing problematic, but you still need to look a little more natural, and I think you look a little uncomfortable. That's all. All right, at the end, I thought that you probably had a good idea to use the quote, but you needed to practice that quote a little bit more because you stumbled over it a bit, and it doesn't come across quite as effectively as I think you want. All right, thank you. And